always reminds me to click that button. So we will be sending out a follow-up email with the recording and then anything the incredible Spencer will want to include in that as well. But I'm going to stop talking, pass you over to kick things off. So take it away.
Amazing. Thanks so much, John. So, hey, thank you everyone for joining. I think we're like 250 people already, which is incredible. I guess I'm fortunate that it's certainly here where I am, it's raining. So maybe everyone's decided to stay in instead of go for their lunchtime walks, which is awesome. If you haven't already said hello and where you're from and that kind of thing in the chat, then please feel free to. I think first thing, there's a bit of an error we've got here. You can see that I was supposed to be joined by my good friend, partner and co-host of a show that we do on YouTube and podcast, Nick Himo. Unfortunately, he's had to work for this really small organization that most of you won't have heard of called Google. He's just having to work for them for the day. So unfortunately, he's not going to be able to join us. So I've completely crossed him off the list, as you can see at the bottom there. So yeah, he's not with us. You've got me for the whole hour. Now, couple of really quick things. Here's what we're going to try to get covered off in today. So we're going to talk about the 5 mistakes that we think that you are going to make when you first start your business. 5 mistakes that I've certainly made over and over again, and many people make all the time. But what we're not just going to leave it there. We're going to make sure that we're giving you the tips and the tools to make sure that you can avoid those mistakes and give your startup, your ideas, your future successes the best opportunity to kind of thrive. We have actually got a bit of a bonus as well. I just decided to maximize this opportunity and give us a little bonus, which is going to be 3 spirit animals that are essential for the entrepreneur. I'm really excited about that bit. So please stick around until we get to the spirit animals bit. I think you're going to really enjoy it. And what I'm really going to try to do is get a good section for Q&A as well, about 15 minutes, hopefully, to do a bit of a Q&A. Don't wait for the Q&A. If you've got questions, jump into the Q&A or into the chat. John's going to be monitoring that as we go through as well. So just to make sure that we can kind of get those questions, any questions that anyone has at any time. We'll try and cover them off today. If we need to, we'll kind of carry on social media or whatever to have those conversations as well. Awesome. So very quick bit about me, because I'm sure that most of you have never heard or seen me before. So I'm Spencer Reyes. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Future Builders. We are trying to enable people to build their future, essentially. So we're creating platforms around people's learning in order to kind of build their skills around entrepreneurship skills, etc. I'm also the founder of a company called Making Ideas Work, which is more of an agency about prototyping and product design to help organizations and people kind of come up with ideas and make them into tangible ideas, tangible things. I'm the host, as I said, of the Spen and Nick Show, or co-host I should have put here, but Nick's not here, so who cares? The co-host of the Spen and Nick Show. I basically love, adore, and think most of the time about product design, innovation, learning, and entrepreneurship, etc. So expect a lot of that for this session. Okay, let's fly straight on. There we go. Of course, the Spen and Nick Show. You've got to do this. Subscribe. If you like the rest of this webinar, then I'm sure you're going to enjoy that show as well. Cool. How about that? Flowing through this agenda already. Introduction done. Okay, on to the 5 mistakes that everybody is going to make. And the first mistake that we think happens all the time, and it's happened to me so many times, it's ridiculous, is that we let ideas float around in our heads for way too long. And I think probably most people are guilty of this, and I've definitely been guilty of it. The idea for Future Builders, or as Future Builders as it is now, when we've been through a bunch of pivots, the idea for that kind of came to me about 6 years ago. And I say it came to me, but actually it was a series of a lot of thoughts over a long period of time that I just couldn't figure out how to get them out of my head. I had this weird idea, but I couldn't figure out how to get it out of my head. And it sat there and did nothing with it for a huge amount of time, literally for 5 years. And I think loads of people are guilty of this. And of course, if ideas are sticking in your head, then they're doing nothing. They are of no value to anyone at all. And they're certainly not going to bring you any value as an entrepreneur or as an innovator. So we're going to talk about how to get them out of your head in a little while. Okay. On to number 2. This chap I love. And I love this chap. Oh, I think my Siri just kicked in. Perfect. Thanks. Complete isolation. And this is here to represent the fact that we believe, I've definitely done this as well, that you'll be spending zero time with potential customers in those early days, thinking that, you know, your idea has to be built. And the thing that you should be doing is building out your idea, figuring out, you know, how to take it to market quickly. And people generally spend way too little time with potential customers, with people to try to find out what their problems are, etc. And so I think the, you know, a massive mistake that people make is they just don't spend enough time with potential customers. As I said, we're going to go through this really fast, so hoping everyone's keeping up. We're going to go through pretty rapid pace, so let's just pick it up. The third mistake that we think people are going to make is that you're going to poorly articulate the value of your idea. Now, here's the thing. When I first started thinking about this idea for Future Builders, how I articulated it, looking back, it was horrendous. I'm going to let you know what it was. It was basically something along the lines of an AI graph database connecting the world's knowledge to people so that they can access amazing learning at the point of need on demand, so that they can become the people. Like, there's just so much craziness in how I was trying to articulate this based on some kind of insights around technology, but not really answering the important things that people really needed. So that articulation really meant that nothing was going to happen. I wasn't able to kind of speak to people really effectively. I wasn't able to test ideas really well. And when I did try to have those conversations, eventually have conversations with people, it was so easy to misunderstand what I was trying to say because the articulation of the idea was so bad. So that's the third mistake that a lot of people make. Goodness me, I've done that so many times and made that mistake so many times. Okay, the third one is a bit of a strange image for this because it looks like the image and the sentence here don't really correlate. But if you will inevitably fail to realize that actions and words are not the same. And what I've got here is basically a mum, and this is to represent this book and this concept called the mum test. And essentially what this means is that people say things to you, but they don't do the actions that they often say they're going to do. And a great example of this is, like, you know, if you speak to your mum or to a family member or to a friend or whatever about something about your idea, they're going to tell you the things that they think you want to hear. They're going to say how good they think it is. They're going to tell you, well, that's a great idea. Aren't you doing well? Yeah, I'd absolutely use it. Of course I'm going to use it. And of course, when you put this into the real world, the actions don't translate in that way. The words don't turn into the actions. And we did this again when we first started Future Builders with one of our early ideas. We built a product. It was fairly quick, in about a month. We built up a bit of a wait list. We launched that early stage product. And what happened was we got one person using it, whereas all of these people had signed up. So it seemed like they were going to want to use it. Only one person actually started using the product. And it happened to be the person that I was sat next to in an office. And I'm sure it was just because she saw me, thought, oh, must have a look at that thing that guy did. And so she went on and started using it. But the clear thing here is that actions and words are not the same. And we need to make sure that we don't fall into the trap of thinking just because someone said that they want something that they actually end up doing it. Okay. And the fifth mistake that people will always fall into is you will waste time building something that nobody wants. And this is kind of the catch-all of all of those ideas, or all of those mistakes, really, is that so often we go down a bit of a rabbit hole of building something that really no one really wants. And the example here is, of course, Google Glass or Glass. And whilst this is an incredibly technologically advanced product, it wasn't serving anyone's needs. It wasn't solving a specific problem, certainly in the consumer space, that people really had. Now, of course, they've had some kind of regeneration of Glass, and there's a whole kind of AI and an augmented reality and virtual reality worlds that are starting to appear now. But when it first launched, Google Glass was just a big failure because nobody wanted to wear something on their head like that. And the problems that it was trying to solve really didn't resonate with people. So try not to waste time, of course, building something that no one wants. So I said we were going to go through those 5 things pretty quickly, but what I want to spend a bit more time on is talking about how you can make sure you don't fall into some of those gaps. So very quickly, let's have a quick activity into the chat. What I'd love is if you can just use the chat just to say which of those mistakes you've made. if I was going to do this, I would be putting 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 down in that chat, just to, because basically I've made all of these mistakes numerous times, and I'm sure many people have done the same thing. So put in those numbers into the chat. John, would you mind just having a quick look? Because I can't actually see the chat right now. Just see what people are saying.
Done. Well, we have a whole bunch saying 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 5, 1, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1 and 3, 1, 3, 4. A whole bunch coming in. I feel like
They're just all happening.
Sierra, 1, 2 steps. It's all happening. Yeah, 1, 2, 4. Yeah, they're all coming in.
They're all coming in, and it's it's classic. And I think we do fall into these gaps. And I'm a product person. I've been working a lot and building a lot of businesses over the last few years, and I'm still falling into these traps really all the time. So fully resonate with everyone who's falling into these. So let's try to move on and see if we can solve some of these things and give people the tips, the tools, the tricks, and the advice to try to avoid falling into some of these mistakes too much. Of course, failure happens. We've got to be learning from it. But actually, if we can avoid some of these things from taking some of the lessons from other people, then so much the better. Okay, let's go on to it. So the first one is about keeping the ideas in your head. Super simple advice here. And the reason that this is a really important thing for me, it's twofold. The first thing is we can come up with loads of ideas. And actually, if we store them in our head, it means we're not making any action. We're not actioning. We're not doing anything about them. We're not driving progress towards actually building out that product or that business. So that's the first thing, is getting it out of your head means that you're going to be doing something with it. The second reason for doing this is that actually, if you get ideas out of your head, if you make a list of 10 things every day, 10 ideas every day, if you brainstorm all of the different projects that you could be doing, if you kind of draw things to try to make sense of them, then it means that you're freeing up your cognitive load to either come up with more ideas or to take that idea on to the next step. And I think just, I'm someone that kind of learns or understands what I'm thinking by getting it out, by writing it down, by brainstorming it, by drawing it, or by prototyping. And I think it can be really helpful for getting, for making sure that you're moving on and you're progressing. Now, of course, you don't just need to use a notebook, something that I am always, regardless of how digital I think I am, I will always carry a notebook because it can be so useful to get those quick ideas. But actually, there's some really great online tools for doing this as well, particularly doing this in collaboration with other people for brainstorming, etc. I use Mural and Miro a huge amount, both with clients, but also on projects of my own. They're basically like online post-it note boards. You can free to use. Miro definitely is free to use completely. Mural, there's a bit of a fee, and Milanote is free to use for a while as well. They're all really good tools, but it means that you can collaborate and get those ideas out onto digital space really quickly and to share those ideas. So that's the first thing. Get those ideas out of your head in whatever means you have to, in order to continue to make progress about that idea, around that idea. And it might be that by getting it all out, you realize that it's not a very good idea, which is great because you're not wasting time kind of researching it and putting in the effort that you need to in order to make it work. Okay, number 2, super obvious. Okay, so the mistake that people make is that they don't speak to customers. So of course, that means you need to speak to potential customers, potential users as soon as possible, and continue to prioritize that as one of the most important things that you can do. Now, there's a couple of nuances here that I would think are really important to highlight around talking to customers. Again, one of the traps that people fall into is that they present their idea to people too early. And so they say, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of this proposition or this idea? And quite often you're not understanding first the problems and the pain points that people really have. And so what you end up doing is kind of guiding people towards your solution. And what that means is that they might tell you, they might say to you, the things that you want to hear. again. So you need to make sure that you're asking people about their pain points, their problems. You want to see people in context. And really, you know, the reason I've got the image here of someone in a coffee shop is that actually go to the place where people, where your perfect target audience hangs out. Where do they operate? What are they doing? If it's a work product, try and get into their workspace to see how people are you know, operating. See how you can try to identify some of the pain points and problems that people are having. If it's about, you know, coffee, then get into a coffee shop and see what things. If it's about students or about university, then get into university space and start to talk to people. When you see the problems that people are encountering directly, you get much more nuance and more information about how you can start to solve those problems. The other thing about speaking to customers is that you want to get to the insight really quickly, really importantly. You want to get to the insight that people have about their pains. Now, this is a classic example of something of a framework called jobs to be done. If you're familiar with jobs to be done, give us a shout out on the chat or something, because I think it's one of the most amazing frameworks to be working with. It's quite a difficult thing conceptually, because jobs to be done, the language that's used often doesn't make that much sense. But actually it's a really good framework once you kind of get your head around what's happening. And essentially what it's about is this idea that people don't buy a product because they want that product. They buy a product because they want to make progress against a problem that they have. Okay, so in this example, this was a guy called Theodore Levitt that came up with this example that's been used all over the world over and over again now. But people don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill bit, so they don't want that. What they want is a 1/4-inch hole. And so, you know, if you start to think about that, particularly an early stage of thinking about what a product is or what a business idea is, actually it might be that the best solution for people that want a hole is not a drill bit. It might be something else. It might be sticky pads, or it might be something else to put something on the wall. Now, actually, with this example, you can go through a lot of layers of abstraction, because actually not many people really want a hole or just want a hole in their wall. What they actually want is a cool picture or a painting on the wall. And actually, if you carry on going, they don't actually want a cool picture or a painting on the wall. They want their room to feel really nice and comfortable. In fact, they even want, carry it on a step further, what they actually want is they want to feel proud about their home, so that when people come over, it's really comfortable and they feel like people are going to enjoy the space and they'll get that kind of pride. So the reason that people buy a 1/4-inch drill or want a hole in the wall isn't because they actually want a hole, isn't because they want a drill. It's actually because they want to feel great about their house. So it's about that security and satisfaction about where they live, etc. So thinking about the reasons that people want to buy things, because often people don't buy the thing for the reasons you think they buy it for a different reason. That's the thing that you've got to get to, because then your marketing and your product can be actually tailored directly to those pain points and those needs that people really have. Okay. The third one is, of course, articulating your idea. And, you know, I've done some really poor articulation of product ideas in the past. And some of those ideas, probably because of the bad articulation, either didn't work or I didn't carry on with because I didn't get good feedback. And the importance of this can't really be underestimated. This is a crowd of people that are absolutely loving whatever it is the person on stage is delivering to them, but it's totally resonating with it. You want to be able to do that with your messaging and with your articulation. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can start to do this. One of the tools that I use a huge amount, it's really popular. It's by Alex Osterwalder and the Strategizer Group. It's called the Value Proposition Canvas. And this is a really easy and quick way to understand the problems, the pains, and the gains that people have, the pain points particularly that people have in their lives. Again, the customer jobs comes back to that jobs to be done thing we talked about in the last mistake, or the last one. And then we start to talk about the products and services. Now, the weird thing, I always think the weird thing with the proposition canvas is it's kind of the wrong way round. What you should be doing is the circle first, and you should be focusing on the right-hand side of that circle, I think, in the first instance. That will come from your user interviews. It will come from conversations that you have. It will come from observations, maybe social media, looking at trends and that kind of thing as well. And then you start to move over to the square box on the left-hand side to look at the game creators and what the actual products and services that you want to do. So I did this with Himo, actually, as part of one of our podcasts. We did this live on a YouTube channel for future builders to try to figure out what it was that we needed to do. And essentially what we've kind of created through this process was a real good understanding of what people needed. And when I articulated this idea earlier of like the knowledge graph that connects all of the world's knowledge to people when they need it, that didn't make sense. But learning playlists is something that people can kind of resonate with. So that's what we've started to build. We've built out this MVP product for learning playlists. Essentially, it's the kind of Spotify for learning. It collates and allows people to collate loads of great learning content into one place so that people can learn and follow through. So that's our proposition canvas. And now we're at that point where we can start to articulate this. But that idea of learning playlists and the Spotify thing didn't come until I started to have those conversations with people. And someone just said, a bit like Spotify. I was like, boom, that's the thing I've been waiting for so long. So easy for people to understand and get a good get a good grasp of really quickly. Another additional thing, the next stage on, in order to articulate your idea in a really great way, is to build a landing page. I was having a conversation with a guy recently from Touch Video Academy, a guy called Kim. And he was like, I want to do this online course, but I don't know how to where to start with it, what to do. I was like, where's your landing page? He's like, I can't do a landing page. It's going to take me forever to build. Like, it's probably going to take me a month. That's going to slow things down. I said, dude, you can do it in a few days. And you can do it on Squarespace, Webflow, Wix. There's a whole load of other no-code website builders, really simple to use. I think Wix is probably the simplest. Squarespace is up there as well. But I've got to say that my favorite tool of the moment is Webflow. I think it's an incredible tool. It's basically drag and drop. There's a load of templates, but you can change every single thing in it. You can create some great animations, great interaction stuff as well. You can even use it to actually build out full web apps as well. So build a landing page. It can be super quick, doesn't need much time. Don't stop there though. Test those different ways of articulating it. Test different propositions with people to see which one's really landing. So I'd definitely do that as quickly as you can. It's getting a landing page built. Okay, number 4. We are rattling through pretty well. Number 4 is to get customers to demonstrate their real intent. And again, this is about not mixing up these ideas of words, things that people are saying to you and what people are actually doing. And testing business ideas, we've got right here. It's a great book. I think there's like 44 experiments inside to try to test things. This is, for me, a lot of this is having an experimental mindset. And if you're willing to test stuff really early, if you're willing to be ashamed of your first product, if you're willing to be happy that that the first iterations, the first things are going to be something you're embarrassed about in the future, then put it out there. That's absolutely what you need to be doing at an early stage when you're building a business. So Testing Up Business Ideas is a great book. The 2 things here, Stripe, we use a huge amount. In fact, a quick story on the Stripe. When we very first built, actually, I'll talk about how we integrated these 2 things. So we used Reddit, not just for connecting to people, using it as a social media platform, but we also use the ads within Reddit as well. And I was blown away by how good Reddit ads worked and how well they converted to users. Really impressive. Because what you have on Reddit is very focused and dedicated people around certain areas and certain interest areas. So you get some really amazing people. We ended up having really, cheap ads to get a whole load of people when we were testing this idea. And what we did is we put a credit card integration from Stripe onto our website so that we weren't just seeing whether people would sign up, we were actually seeing whether they would pay. Now, the problem was we did get people signed up before the product was launched, but because I was a bit of a novice with Stripe, I let their subscriptions carry on for 6 months. So, so we had quite a few people that were paying for a subscription for a service that didn't even exist yet. And we launched the product, and they kind of carried on paying, and whatever else. But with 6 months, we were charging people, and we hadn't actually officially launched the actual payment business model. So I had to go back to all those people with a bit of a tail between my legs and say, look, I'm really sorry. This was a complete error on my behalf. Refunded everyone the full amounts. But it was amazing how quickly you can integrate something like Stripe into a web flow or into a different website builder to start to get payments. And it's a really great way to test things. Fortunately, when I did go back to these people, they really appreciated that I had actually given them the full refund. And so I converted them from people that might be, detractors from the brand and not appreciate it, to people that actually came back, and now we're still close, and they're still customers. So that's great. So yeah, test as much as you can. Get real intent is the key thing. You want people to be showing that they would pay for your product as quickly as possible. Okay, and the third one, of course, is don't waste time building something that nobody wants. And I'm a believer in the power of the prototype. Got a couple of screenshots about the different scale or different fidelities, if you like, of what a prototype could look like. And this is both for the Future Builders platform, older versions. But essentially, we've got this paper prototype idea. What I did was just drew this out in a couple of minutes. And I took photos of it and used, you can use a bunch of different tools, but I used Marvel app on the phone, because you can stitch together different images to make it look and feel like an app. So you can start to figure out what those flows are going to be. And then on the right-hand side, this is what I did in Sketch. And yeah, just to get that kind of higher fidelity, more professional looking prototype. It doesn't do anything other than kind of stitch the screens together. There's no other back-end functionality. But what that means is you can start to piece together how your tool is going to work. Now, the thing about prototypes is I'm just showing you kind of digital versions because that's the easiest way to explain it. But actually, prototypes can manifest in any way. I really believe that you can prototype pretty much anything. You can prototype a service. You can prototype, obviously, digital tools. You can prototype physical tools, physical products as well. So I really think that you can prototype anything. The key thing here, and the reason why prototyping is so good and so useful, again, it's probably twofold at least. The first thing is you're getting that idea out of your head. You're getting it onto paper. You're starting to work through how it will actually work, how it will feel. And then you can start to test it with people as well. Once you've identified the pain points and the problems that people have, you can start to test the actual product and say, well, is the next, click on this button. What is that screen, the screen that you expected to see? What did you want to see? Is it giving you, the results that you expected, etc. So that's a really amazing thing to do. And there's a whole load of different prototyping tools that you can use. We've got here Adobe XD, Sketch, InVision, and Figma, probably four of the most popular ones. They're pretty easy to get to grips with. If you're familiar with, things like PowerPoint or Keynote, you can even do it actually in Keynote or PowerPoint as well. But they're pretty easy to kind of draw the boxes and that kind of thing. And there's some really amazing tutorials on YouTube, etc. Or look on websites for inspiration. I believe in this idea of stealing like an artist as well. I'm not a designer by trade, but I've learned how to design from copying other people essentially. And what I do is I copy people's designs and then start to change them around so that they're fit for purpose for the product that I'm working on at that time as well. So steal like an artist, credit people, of course, but looking at people, places for inspiration. Look, I am talking pretty quickly. I'm hoping that everyone's following and everyone's keeping up, but why don't we just have a couple of seconds just to pause? I'll have a drink of water. And why don't you put into the chat tool, what are your favorite tools? It can be prototyping tools, or it could be web building tools, or it can be things like the business model canvas or value proposition design. What kind of things do you guys use, you folks use, in order to kind of articulate your ideas, or in order to prototype and all that good stuff? Pop it in there. And John, if you're still with us as well, if you want to jump in and kind of just give us a quick run through of some of the tools that people are putting into the chat, that would be awesome.
Yeah, of course. I'm still here. So we've got a whole bunch of people saying XD, Photoshop, Trello, Marvel, which I'd never heard of before. A whole bunch of people saying XD as well. Photoshop, done. It's all. I use MailChimp for
Yeah.
newsletters, InDesign, Adobe Illustrator, Miro.
Nice.
It's all happening.
It's
Yes.
all happening. Yeah. I've got to say, for me, XD at the moment is smashing it. When it first was released, there was a bunch of functionality that it didn't do so well, but actually they're really up in their game. I think it's the tool that encompasses everything. It's not just about design, but it also you can bring in the prototyping side of it as well really nicely. It's got good interactions, good animations and stuff now. So yeah, for me, XD's really rocking it. And Marvel as well. Just to your point there, John, Marvel's great because it's you need to go to Marvel app. Otherwise, you're going to get some film franchise, apparently, some kind of film franchise. But if you put a Marvel app into Google or into the App Store, then you can download that to your phone. It's really good for quick ideas. And like if you've done a sketch, you can just take a photo and start to stitch that together really, really nicely. So I'm just going to, just checking out my notes. I think I've covered off most things here. And we'll move on. Okay, I said we were going to try and leave about 15 minutes for Q&A. I think we're about on time. So about 10 minutes, I think we're going to go through the bonus section on the 3 spirit animals that every entrepreneur really needs to have in their mind when they're starting to think about how to build a business. Okay, so the first one is, of course, it's the hedgehog. So hopefully you found this picture of the hedgehog as gorgeous and as amusing as I have. Now, the reason the hedgehog is an important one is if you haven't read or come across a book called Good to Great, it's well worth checking out. In Good to Great, Jim Collins talks about a concept called the hedgehog concept. But before we get onto the hedgehog, we need to start to talk about the fox, because the fox is kind of the opposite of the hedgehog. And what I mean by that is the fox is very cunning, very clever, very smart. It will try loads of different techniques and tactics in order to get what it wants. It will try different angles. It will try different ways of getting things in order to try to get its prey, essentially. Now, the hedgehog is very different to that. The hedgehog does one thing really well, which is that it rolls into a ball and protects itself with its spikes on its back like that. So what you need to be doing is thinking like a hedgehog particularly when you're at the early stage of an organization or building a business, but more than that, I think probably for forever. And one of the reason it's in Jim Collins's book is because what he did was he looked at what the great companies in the world are doing, and they basically take this idea of the hedgehog concept. So it's about doing one thing and one thing really well. The difficulty is, of course, how do you find out what you should be doing really well? What is your hedgehog concept? And so this is a graphic which kind of explains what it is. It's about the thing that you are most deeply passionate about. Okay. And it's the intersection of what you're most deeply passionate about with what you can be the best in the world at. So, what is it what the skills and the experiences that you've got, where have you come from, what those kind of backgrounds and experiences and the working practices that you have maybe, and also what's going to drive your economic engine, essentially what's going to make you good money. And it's the intersection of those things basically is your hedgehog concept. Now, this is very similar to some people maybe thinking about ikigai, this kind of Japanese concept of the reason for being. And it's really similar. Ikigai is about understanding what you love, which is your passion, what you're great at, which is what the best in the world, what makes you money, your economic engine, and it's what the world needs, which is the fourth one. So if you can identify those things, then essentially that is your hedgehog concept. Now, when I was thinking about doing this, I remembered an image that I saw. This is the co-founder of Waze. And I love this t-shirt because it explains it really well, which is the main thing is to keep the main thing, right? And it sounds ridiculous, but that is just everything. All you have to do is focus on that one main thing. If you start getting distracted by different things, by competitors or different ideas, once you've nailed down what it is that you should be focusing on, you've got to go hell for leather with that idea and not give up until you're getting there. Okay, so that's the first one, is the hedgehog concept as opposed to the fox. Okay, now I love this quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald, which is intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. And the reason I've dropped this one in is because the next concept kind of seems like it's opposed to that idea of doing one thing. And actually, it is a bit opposed to it, but it's super important to be thinking about as well, which is number 2 is the chameleon. And of course, what we know about a chameleon is the chameleon changes, it adapts. It's very adaptable in terms of its skin, and it's able to change color. And it changes color, of course, either to blend into the background or actually to attract people. Now, I'm not sure whether this chameleon it looks like he's trying to attract someone because it's bright colors, but I don't know whether he's trying to attract someone or whether he's already attracted someone already, because he looks pretty tired. But who knows? Maybe say in our chat function what you reckon that chameleon is doing. Has he just attracted, or is he just about to attract someone else? Now, the thing, of course, with a chameleon is it's about adaptability. And adaptability is the combination of two things. Firstly, it's flexibility. So this is your attitude and willingness to adapt. This is really about the mindset. Have you got a growth mindset? Have you got the mindset to want and be willing to adapt, to change things up? And have you got the versatility, which is the ability to adapt? So mindset is so important. We really need to be not fixating ourselves on one solution before we've spoken to people. We need to be able to flex and adapt and be willing to adapt, but also we need to practice that kind of versatility muscle, if you like. So making sure that we're taking every opportunity to practice and to continue to adapt as much as possible. So 2 ways to do, that's what we really need to be thinking about. How can we ensure that we're willing to adapt? How can we make sure that we have the ability to adapt? Now, in order to kind of reconcile the chameleon and the hedgehog, the way that I look at this, which is from a thing called a book called The Lean Startup, which I've got down here as well. The Lean Startup is a great book. I'm sure many of you have already read it. But the really interesting thing about Lean Startup is one of the interesting things about Lean Startup is that there's this pyramid where at the top you've got the vision, in the middle you've got strategy, as I remember it, and then at the bottom you've got the tactics, the specific actions that you're going to do in order to fulfill that strategy and vision. Now, the vision never changes. The vision is the thing that is your hedgehog concept. That's the thing. You've got to figure out what that vision is and not dwell on anything else and really go for it. But the strategies and the tactics, the ways that you get to fulfill that vision are the things that you can change. You can change the way that you deliver your products, the customers that you serve, so much of it you can flex, and you can change based on what you're hearing, what customers are saying, and what the world kind of needs and what the market really needs. So always try to be flexible and versatile. Now, the third one, I think you're going to love. I wish I could take full credit for it, but I've got to say that Nick Himo, who was supposed to be on the call, he actually came up with the animal for this, although it was a concept that I was talking about on Instagram, and that is the dung beetle. Now, of course it is. Everyone thinks that the entrepreneurial spirit animal that's one of the most important to us is, of course, the dung beetle. Okay, I'm going to try to enable you to understand where I'm going with this. Now, of course, the dung beetle, as is represented in this picture, is a tiny little animal that is able to push huge amounts of dung around pretty much all day. And what it does is it's pushing it up sand dunes and big hills, really almost like mountain-like structures for the size of the beetle. And it pushes and pushes and pushes, and it gets towards the top. And you've seen the videos. It slips or something happens and the dung falls down. But what it does, it doesn't just leave it there. It comes back, gets pushing again, and it strives to get back up and push the dung back up the hill. And I think that is a really good metaphor, really good picture to have in your minds about what you need to do as an entrepreneur. It's all about persistence, perseverance, determination, because when you're climbing a mountain, I've got Siri going on and I can't seem to get him off, get it off. When you're pushing, as an entrepreneur, you're pushing almost like pushing a an immovable object up a hill. And what happens when you get to the top of the hill, of course, is that you find that there's a far bigger hill afterwards as well. So the dung beetle is a really good thing to be focusing on. I think there's a couple of other traits to have: the entrepreneurial mindset as well. So resilience and determination we've talked about. Creativity and innovation, hugely important. For me, innovation is where you add value to the creative endeavor. It's not just creativity for the sake of creativity, it's creativity to add value to individual people. That's add value to your business, but also adding value to your users as well. The top left here, experimentation and learning. The key here is you need to be learning as much, as quickly as you possibly can. That's through experiments, but it's also learning about yourself, learning about your own practice as much as possible so that you've got the best chance of succeeding. And of course, leadership and collaboration can be so important. I've had a long time as a kind of a solopreneur, if you like, the only person in an organization, and it's super hard. What I've been really fortunate about is being able to gather people that I can collaborate with and work with, not directly within the organization, within the business, but a support mechanism that you can work on as well. And I think that can be so important. So having those traits of an entrepreneurial mindset would be really really valuable. Okay. What I would love is your thoughts. What is your favorite? I'm going to tell you what my favorite is. I love that chameleon. That picture of the chameleon I thought was awesome. But tell us what your favorite character, does this resonate with you? Do you think it works? Is there any challenges or any problems that you see with these kind of analogies that I've used? And, as a fun one, what other animals do you think we should know about? Any other animals that you think might represent really well the kind of entrepreneur? I'd love to hear about that as well. John, over to you to have a little scan through any of this that's coming through, if there's anything interesting happening.
Yeah, I was looking at the chat and everyone's like, this is so me. Yeah, this one. This is great. So many people are saying chameleon, hedgehog, whole bunch for chameleon. I mean, I feel like I'm definitely a dung beetle. 2 and 3, I love the chameleon. Dung beetle, yes. A whole bunch.
Awesome.
I'm very good at hedgehog. I'm very good at curling up and hiding. Yeah. Chameleon, definitely chameleon. Yeah, a whole bunch. This is great.
Cool. I think that
I like that. Somebody said a butterfly. It's a new one.
Oh yes. Okay, so
A sloth. Yeah.
We nearly put the butterfly, and actually if Nick was on the call, he would have added the caterpillar or the butterfly. And for him, I think, maybe I'm wrong here, and if I'm wrong, please tell me in the chat, but I think the idea here is that the caterpillar has to go through that period of change to emerge as this beautiful butterfly. And actually that emerging out of a crisis, and we're in the crisis right now with COVID-19 happening and all the things. I mean, it's not just COVID-19 now. Of course, we've got huge amounts of trauma and discomfort that's happening across the world right now. But actually, how can we come out of this better? And I think that, for me, is what the butterfly kind of represents, in kind of coming out as a better version of ourselves in the future. So hopefully that's broadly what you were talking about with the butterfly. But we'll perhaps see in the chat in a few minutes. Okay, so we have, blimey. I think, John, run to time there. We've got about 15 minutes for Q&A. Hopefully, I really hope that this hasn't blown people's minds too much and been too weird a concept for people. But I would love to hear people's... Oh, here we go. There we go. Love to hear people's Q&As. So I'm going to jump into this and see if we can start to answer some of these questions as well. Cool. So, awesome. So, Lou Delise, where do you find them? How do you approach who to ask? This is in response, I think, to number 2, which is about finding your potential customers. A really, really great question. I would say there's loads of places, and really anyone that you can talk, anyone that's willing to give you some time, you should absolutely focus on getting them to having a conversation with them. But I think what you really need to be doing first is try to narrow down your target audience as much as possible. Trying to figure out, maybe with personas can be good, but actually finding real people that kind of epitomize the the people that you want to be targeting is a really good way to do it. And then try to hang out, try to be where those people are. Unashamedly, right now we've got a few hundred people on this. I'm building a business which is hopefully helping people to learn how to build businesses. So I'm testing some of these concepts right now through this kind of method. And I think any way that you can do to kind of share and to talk to people, I'm really hopeful that I can connect with people after this, and ask people about some of these concepts and that kind of thing as well. So really getting into places where people are at, hanging out where they are, but also use social media. We all know how powerful social media is, but getting into Facebook groups, into LinkedIn groups, those kind of things can be really useful as well. Put out some surveys onto LinkedIn. LinkedIn's just recently got a tool where you can put kind of a polling thing real quick. So that can be a good way to get people signed up to things. So yeah, loads of different ways. Any way is good. Meetups, obviously, before we had lockdown was great, but webinars and stuff like that that GA and etc. are doing as well. Really, really useful. Okay. Thanks for the brainstorming tools. What about task processing, Trello, Asana, Monday? Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've been through a lot this talk, but of course, there are so many ways for actual delivery and managing the delivery of your products as well. So Trello's great. The kind of Kanban boards is really great. I use Asana a huge amount when I was working at Makers Academy. We set up a great Asana workflow on there. Monday's also great. I've started to use actually now Notion a huge amount, because Notion gives you a load of flexibility, and I've been able to use that as the kind of central place for big projects. So I do a lot of jobs to be done analysis, and you can do job stories and that kind of stuff. You can do Kanban boards, you can do load of project management stuff. You can do all kinds of things in Notion. Well worth checking that out if you haven't. And look, all of these things are great. The preference is entirely up to you and how you work, really. So I wouldn't be able to kind of say which one's going to be best. I've used a bunch of them. How long do you try an idea for? Great question. If it doesn't seem to be going anywhere, is there a time limit? I don't think there's a time limit. I think there's a bunch of stuff that can help. If you have 5 good conversations with people, you will get to a trend really quickly. Within 5 good conversations, you can find out whether it's starting to work for people. If you look at the Design Sprint, so the Sprint book by Jake Knapp, they talk about the testing section of that as being just speak to 5 people. So you don't need to continue to try and push an idea indefinitely. You want to try and get rid of it. As bad as it sounds, you want to get rid of that idea as quickly as possible. If you prove that it's not working, then don't keep flogging it. Don't keep trying to go with it. We did it too late with Future Builders. It took us about 3 months to realize that one of the first products that we built wasn't really working. Then we had to change everything. Then what we did was came up with 10, it was a co-founding team of 3. We came up with 10 different ideas each. We got that down to 10 ideas. We built 10 different landing pages, and we put Reddit ads to those 10 different landing pages. And we literally tested who's signing up the most. And the idea that we ended up going with, which was the playlists of learning, was 10 times better signups than everything else. That took a week. And then every other idea is gone, and it's completely gone for good for us. So you want to be as quick as possible. Be ruthless with your ideas as quickly as possible. Okay. To get potential customer input, would you recommend face-to-face time, questionnaires, bit of both? Yeah, a bit of both. I think they can fuel each other. Actually, I find it really useful when you do a questionnaire and you get a couple of insights, and then you can jump in to a conversation with someone that's given you something a little bit unexpected. I did this recently where someone was talking about the fear of starting up a business, and that it wasn't just fear of like failure. It was fear of doing well as well, which really surprised me. And I ended up like getting in touch with that person and then having a call, or a Zoom call, because we couldn't, meet face to face. But that was such a good way to uncover an insight that I hadn't appreciated. Yeah, really, really useful. So I think a combination of both, use one to fuel the other. And I think that can be really a way to kind of continue to narrow down what it is that you're trying to do. So Josephine, when you have a vision, but it's not quite working, any tips to find out how and when, I think to find out a new vision or adapt the vision? Big question. It's probably a really hard one to answer without a little bit more context. But I think the key, and I'll probably keep coming back to this, is keep going back to customers. Don't, I talk about the vision as being something that you shouldn't move, but if the vision is not right, then it has to be something, because otherwise you're on a path to failure. It has to be something that you change. So I think you have to be talking to as many customers at that point, and many potential customers, as many users as you possibly can. They basically tell you what it is that you should do, but you have to be asking the right questions, and you have to be scrutinizing it and getting the right insights from what it is that they say. Sometimes they'll say something to you and you might want to try to build the thing exactly as they've said it. That's not always the thing that they want. It's a little bit like the drill and the hole, people will go buy a drill because they think that that's the only way to get a hole, but you need to find what the problem is that people have. It's that straightforward. And actually, if you think about all the businesses that fail, the majority of businesses fail because there isn't a market need, because you've built something that people don't really need. You have to find the thing that people are desperately in need of. Okay. The best tools for user research, telephone, for me, is the best. It's probably in many ways the hardest one for people to actually get up and do. Like, I struggle sometimes, even though I'm quite extroverted, I sometimes struggle to get on the phone and to phone people, but I think it can be the best thing. Again, when we very first got those signups for Future Builders with those really early web page, landing page experiments, I'd get on the phone call to them as quickly as I could, particularly if they're in the UK. They were coming from all over the world, but if they're in the UK, just to really understand who they are and what their problems are, what they're finding. And one of the insights that I got from that was that there was this really big problem around recent graduates and newly employed people. So maybe people that have been in work for like 1 to 3 or 4 or 5 years, and they're looking for something different from the path that they're on. And that was a really big insight for us, because it meant that we could start to tailor our marketing and etc. for those kinds of people. We're getting loads of problems. So I'm just going to it's essential for a business to solve a problem for a fashion brand. Hey, even a fashion brand is solving a problem. It really is. And so I think that you've got to understand what that problem is that the fashion brand is serving. So it could be that there's, there's demand for people to look great. And, you've got like a social problem there that you've got to keep up with people. So it's really about, trying to understand even that problem. I don't think every business has to solve a problem. It could be an opportunity based thing where there's too big an opportunity here. But I think generally, it depends who you speak to, but generally, my belief is that there is no product or no problem that is not currently served in some way. It might just be not served very well. So I think, probably a contentious one, but I'd say that most businesses need to be solving a problem. If you're not solving a problem, then there's not a real need. You need to have people that really have a desperate need for your thing. Well, I'm worried about getting through all these. So what I'm happy to do is, I think I spoke to John about this earlier. If people want to stick around, I'm happy to carry on answering questions, going through this. I think we've got another 24 or so in the Q&A here, which is amazing. Thank you all so much. Or we can carry on, in social media or whatever. You can definitely add me on Instagram, on LinkedIn or whatever. But I'm happy to carry on if people are. Maybe like give us a +1 or a yes into the chat, and John can have a look and see whether we should be carrying on. A potential customer panel is a good idea if they're likely to tell you just what you want. Yeah, panels can be good if you've got a group of people, like a focus group or something. They can be good, but it's about, again, the questions that you want to be asking people. Don't be talking about your solution too early. Don't be guiding people and taking people down a certain path too early. You want to be making sure that you're talking about you want to be talking about them. And in fact, kind of, a good rule of thumb here when talking to people is you want your potential customers to be talking way, 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 way more than you do. And if they're talking about themselves, that's when you can really get the magic, and that's when you can start to find out everything you need to find out in order to make sure you're getting the right product. So I think keep questions really open, talk about pain points, talk about, there's actually a really good one which I'll throw in here, which is called the switching interview. If you've got a competitor and you can find people that recently signed up to that competitor, you can try to find out what motivated them to go and sign up to their product or buy their product. You know, if it's in fashion, then you can talk about why they bought a certain pair of trainers, or why they went to a certain, you know, retail shop or whatever. What was it that triggered it? What were the points along the way, along the journey, that helped them get to that point? That isn't asking anything about your product or your solution. You're talking about people's experiences. Everyone wants to talk about their experiences, so that's a really good way to do it. That should mean that you're not just hearing the things that you want to hear. How do you stay motivated when things may not be doing well? Great question from Daya. Motivation's really hard. I don't know about you lot, but I found motivation really difficult through this crisis period. I've been up and down a huge amount. Some days just not wanting to get anything done on my work. So that's been a real difficulty. I think if you're doing something that you love, it makes it easier. If you're doing something you're good at and you can start to make the progress, then that is also a really great way to be doing it. So yeah, really focusing on what drives you. If you can get that intrinsic motivation going rather than having the extrinsic kind of incentive stuff, that's huge, really huge. Paul started a business 2 months ago. Hey, congrats. That's awesome. Can't sell eBay because my mask and hand sanitizer is not allowed. Oh man, okay. But I'm struggling to find customers. How do I market my product with a low budget? Great question. Social media, I think, again, it's like the catch-all. It's an obvious thing. I'm not like a super hot growth marketing person. But maybe if anyone's got any ideas for this one as well, you know, jump in, and maybe we can help out Paul with this thing. It looks like John might be coming with that as well. That'd be awesome. Social media. Hopefully John's on this. Cool. How would you integrate ads? I think I'm not 100% sure on exactly what the question's about here, but what we used, we just ran ads on Reddit, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and just start to trawl through the data and use spreadsheets and Google stuff to be able to get the insights that we want. We didn't really integrate with any other platforms. You can do, of course, you could integrate with MailChimp or like a load of other SaaS things, but we didn't really integrate ads into anything else that we had. SEO is super important. Yeah, I think SEO is, you know, the reason I haven't mentioned it about here when it comes to marketing is that's kind of a long game, and SEO is incredibly important for your Google to be able to get high in the Google rankings, etc. Again, not a super expert, but I think SEO is like, it's so important to be thinking about early. Try and figure out what the keywords are that you need to be focusing on. Make sure that that's working out. We are at 2:00. So if you are dropping off, like, amazing. I'm so glad that you lasted and stayed with us for the full hour here. Feel free, to drop off. Feel free to reach out to me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, etc. The Spencer Ayres on Instagram, and just Spencer Ayres. You can get me there on LinkedIn as well. If you want to check out more content like this that we're doing, the Spen and Nick show on YouTube, and we do all the podcasts and stuff as well. I'm going to carry on because we've still got a couple of hundred people here. So I'm just going to carry on flying through some of these questions because, do you know what? I'm enjoying it. And if I can help in the slightest way anyone who's out there, then that is amazing as well. Cool. Is it best to approach businesses via their email listed on the website or directly? I don't think it matters. I think approaching businesses, actually, I don't think it matters, but I think actually a good way to be doing it is trying to hit every channel that you can. If you've got a direct email, great. That's a brilliant way to do it. If you're going through LinkedIn, I always find that a nice, well thought of LinkedIn message can really help when you're connecting. So don't just randomly connect, put a well considered message on there. That can definitely help with getting connections. Yeah, definitely do that. Make it as personal as you can. You know, I find those, you know, the worst ones are like, you know, you get them all at the moment. Everyone's struggling, get COVID and the pandemic. We can do this for you, and it's like, oh, another one, really? But actually, if you're thinking about how you can do that, then in a really good way, then definitely go for it. Tips on how to overcome imposter syndrome. It's real, and it is hard to overcome. I've had it a bunch of times, and I know many people go through imposter syndrome, and it can be a real challenge. I think there's a whole load of techniques, methods that people use. You know, one thing is, the chances are you're way better and way better prepared than you think you are for the role that you're going into. If you're founding a business and you feel like you're out of your depth, I think everybody that's founded a business has felt like they've been way out of their depth. Everyone, you know, the whole thing about starting a business, being an entrepreneur or anything, or even just going into work, is that you're constantly learning. And the best way to get over it is to continue to be open and to be open to learning. And I think as you start to learn and you gather that confidence and you gain your own confidence, I think that's how you can start to get over, I think, imposter syndrome. But it keeps coming back. It's tough. Yeah, I don't have any other thoughts right now on it, but if you want to connect, and please do. I know that Kat's just asked about contact information. Yeah, hit me up on Instagram, on LinkedIn. You can connect through, you know, follow on YouTube. If you want to get on email, then please do as well. It's spencer@futurebuilders.co. Please, yeah, get in touch in any way that you can. I'd love to support in with whatever I can. Is the idea is more of a space? What's a good way to gather information and prototype? As a printmaker, I want to open up a cafe that invites people alongside printmaker. Okay, this is a good one. Prototypes, you know, I believe that prototypes can happen in any way. If you've got a physical space, is there a way that you can do a small version of that physical space to start with? Is there a way that you can do like a pop-up? That might be a good way to do it. And you know, I've literally built the cardboard cutout version of a space when I was doing kind of the online learning environment, showing that it doesn't have to be you know, it doesn't have to be a classroom, when I was, you know, a few years ago. So I think you can model things as well. I think that's probably a good way to do it. Yeah, get in touch, Chip. We'll have a chat. I'd love to think about that a bit more detail, to see if I can help you out with that one. The books, Good to Great by, and I'll drop this into to an email follow-up or anything as well. Good to Great's a great book. The Lean Startup is another great book. Testing Business Ideas is a great book to get as well. Got really good guides on that one. Very practical guides about how to test ideas. And then Sprint, it's the other one that I mentioned. Sprint is all about the Google design sprint. It basically says solve big problems and test new ideas in 5 days. And you can do that. Really good. Really, really, really nice one. C. Davis, loving the pace of your presentation. Thank you so much. That's a real joy. I was really, really worried that I was going too fast. So thanks so much for saying that. While some of the methods you described, got any suggestion from preventing others stealing a business idea? And I think we've got a similar one here, protect your online business. Yeah, this is a challenging one. My instinct, if I'm honest, is to let people steal. And I'll explain a bit more on this, because an idea is one thing. The execution is where you make or break your company, where things either work out or they don't. I think if you're not sharing your idea online, if you're not, you know, it's like holding it in your head. It's never going to get anywhere. And it's a little bit like, having 100% equity of something that's worth zero is still worth zero. If you've got the most amazing idea, but it's stuck in your head, it's worth zero. So you've got to put it out there and take a little bit of a gamble and a little bit of a risk. The chances are absolutely that people aren't going to want to steal your idea. And that even if they do, they won't execute it like you, because you're the person that came up with it and you're the brains behind it. So I don't think it's not something that I've ever worried about. And I don't think it's something that people should worry about. If you've got something which is like an incredible innovation and you need to patent it and all of that good stuff, then absolutely, you've got to be protecting that one. But if it's if it's a web business, if it's a service business, if it's a more of a conventional thing that's not a super amazing innovation, then I think go for it, get it out there, share it with as many people as you can. That's my advice. Probably a lot of people would disagree with that, but hey, you need to listen to people and see what the best thing is for you. Thinking big or thinking small when you start, think small and big at the same time. Again, that kind of contradiction of two things happening. You need to know as a founder, particularly as an entrepreneur, where the big vision is, where this could go, how far you could take this thing, how big a world you could occupy. But you start small. You have to start with the smallest thing that you can possibly do. And actually, this comes into that next question as well, of where you begin when making a product. You have to start with the smallest thing. It's an MVP, so it has to be viable. The big thing that a lot of people think about or miss when they think about a minimum viable product is the viability of the product. An MVP is not just a shit product. Okay, it's a product which does what you need to do in the most basic way in order for you to learn. The key thing about building an MVP or starting to build a product is that you're building something in order to learn how that works, in order to learn whether it resonates, in order to learn whether people can make progress against the problems that they have. That's the most important thing when you're doing your MVP. So start small, think big is what I would say. Really difficult to hold those two concepts in your mind at the same time. I understand that. And it can make you go around in circles. To be honest, the idea that I had around the thing that sat in my head for 5 years was because I didn't know how to start with the smallest thing. I couldn't break it down into something that made sense in a small way. But once I did, everything started to flow from that and it started to make sense. So start small. The best way to begin to make a product, I think it's prototyping first, because you've got to be thinking about the flow. Even if it's a service, you've got to be thinking about the touch points that you want your customers to go through. If it's a physical product, you need to be thinking about all the elements of the design and what make it viable. But when you start to build your product, I think there are amazing no-code environments now that are worth looking at. And these are, you can build something without a line of code, build a digital product without a line of code. And they are getting to the point now where they're exceptional and you can do pretty much anything. I know a guy who was building a fintech app using banking APIs, using all of this crazy technology, and he did it without any code in a week. So you can do it. Yeah, I'd say look at Bubble. I think it's bubble.io or bubble.us. I can't remember actually now. I'll try and put that somewhere. If you get in touch with me, I'll find it. There's one called Glide. Webflow actually is pretty good as well. The first MVPs that I built for some things were in a spreadsheet, kind of data-driven MVPs using a spreadsheet to work out kind of the formulas and the algorithms. So that can work. The lightest weight thing that you can do is what you need to be doing as well. If you have more than one idea, how do you come up with your business, your two companies? How do you work on all of them and efficient? Do you have any? Yeah, that is a good question. I've kind of got two businesses, so I can resonate with this as well. It can be really difficult, really challenging. I think try not to. Try to have just one thing. And what I would say is do a test to see which one is the one that's going to be most worth focusing on. And when I say most worth focusing on, that could be for a number of different reasons. It could be that it's worth focusing on because it's a great market. because it's solving a great problem, but it could also be it's worth working on because it's the one that you're most passionate about. And if you're more passionate about it, it's far more likely that you're going to have the resilience to carry on through those really difficult times. So I would try to narrow it down to having just one thing that you focus on. The reason I've got the two businesses, essentially one's a services business and one's a product business, they kind of integrate, and I maybe will integrate them into one thing in the future, but they're very different propositions. And I kind of focus on one only for a while, and then I focus on the other only for a while. Yeah, I think I've kind of talked about this, but yeah, do stuff in your spare time, 100%, Lawrence. You know, if you've got a job, you know, I'm not implying that this is the case, but rather than, you know, watching a film on Netflix, or rather than, you know, work on your job. If you really want this, spend every bit of time that you can to try to make it work. Matt, how do you spot opportunities in the first place? Observation plus experience. I think the previous experiences that you've had and observing people out in the wild, probably the best way to be spotting opportunities. If you can, and it's a bit like a muscle. Once you're observing, you're seeing patterns of behavior. Once you're able to bring in some of your experiences, then you can start to gather the insights that you need in order to focus on your business. So I think, and when I talk about observation, really what I'm talking about is listening. Listening is like one of the superpowers. So many people aren't great listeners, and when you can really tune into to listening to people's problems, yeah, that's a really great one to be focusing on. How do you engage customers during lockdown? Hopefully like this. Capitalize on any opportunity to connect to people in online spaces. Get doing videos. You know, the reason that Nick and I do this podcast and YouTube channel is it's just to connect to people and to share some of the things we're thinking about. It's a slow burner. We're not like, you know, we're not YouTubers or anything like that. We've got a few, you know, 150 or whatever now subscribers, and we get a few hundred views on some of our videos. But what it's doing is connecting to people, and it means that then we can start to have conversations with people as well. So video content, any content is great. Write blogs, get on Instagram. Giving people value on Instagram can be a great thing as well. What if you're an artist? Just be awesome. You don't have to solve a problem necessarily. Just be an awesome artist and understand what your audience wants to have and what they want to see. Make art, you know, in a way that resonates with people. Maybe it's about challenging them, or maybe it's about aesthetic. You know, you probably know that way better than I do, for sure. I'd imagine. Crikey, flying through. Oh goodness, sorry. What was that called? The switching interview. Yeah, so switch interview. Look up jobs to be done. Switch interview. Katriona, that's probably the best thing. Do I outsource? Yeah, I've done a bunch of outsourcing. Used completely outsourced dev teams in Romania. I've done quite a lot of outsourcing with freelancers. It's a great resource. There are amazing freelance communities out there. Definitely tap into wherever you can. Any tips on a life coach starter online coaching? It's a shame that Himo's not on this because he's a coach, not so much a life coach, more of a business coach, but does quite a lot of sessions through online. I think content is a great way to start to reach out to people, show people what it is that you can do through video content. And don't worry about video content. Literally get your phone, put it in front, talk, release it. That's the best way to start. Again, you'll look back in a few months and go, "What on earth was I doing?" That looks awful, but you know, you've got to start in order to be great. Oh, that's a nice quote. Start in order to be great. Yeah. Struggling to find collaborators to help with elements of the business. How to find? I mean, yeah, meetups were great. Things like. Yeah, there's some really good freelance places. I'm sure the Dots is pretty good if you're not on that. Yeah, some really good freelance communities. connect more to General Assembly and to everything that John's doing with General Assembly London and the rest of the UK, yeah, I'd say do that. Milkshaken is a really cool name, by the way. There's a great Jobs to be Done story about a milkshake. I don't know if that's any relevance to that at all, but that's cool. Chip, please send me the stuff. Send me an email. Get in touch on LinkedIn. At what point should you think about talking to investors? Early and often. That's a really good question. It's a really challenging one to know the right answer. But fundraising can take months, and getting to know investors and potential funders quite early is definitely worth doing. So I'd say go early. The worst that's going to happen is they're going to hate your idea, and that's going to be a good proof point for you. So I think it's well worth talking early and often. Look, I feel like we're probably overstaying my welcome, maybe, but there's still a few of you out there. So I think we'll perhaps try to wrap it up there, John. It felt like that was valuable for people. It felt like it was a fun session anyway. So I've got a huge amount out of it. Please do get in contact on LinkedIn, as I can getting buzzes on my watch here to say that people are doing that, which is awesome, on Instagram, etc. And thank you all so much for your time and for listening on this dreary Wednesday afternoon.
Perfect. Done. Well, I'll come back in there and just be like, that's it. We're done. But it's been great to still see a whole bunch of people still on this call. So thank you so much for still kind of hanging in there, and for Spencer answering all your questions. I can see the chat going off with everyone saying thank you so much. So a huge thank you to Spencer, and then for you guys as well who have stayed to tune in. But like I mentioned, we are recording this event. It will go out. So if you've missed anything, if Spencer was talking too quickly, yeah, we'll be sending that out. So we look forward to kind of hearing from you there, or just seeing you on some more events as well. So a huge thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Can I do one very quick, another shameless plug, John? I've actually recorded this session, basically these sessions as part of our YouTube channel. So they're going to be launched in the next couple of days as well. So if you do want to hear a probably slightly more polished version of this at a bit of a quicker time, then that's going to be available as well on the Sven and Nick Show YouTube. So awesome. Thank you again. No more plugs, I promise.
Perfect. Done. We'll call it a day. See you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.